To preach off the podium there. Well, thanks for the very kind introduction, especially from an estimable and formidable competitor we used to do out in Orange County years ago, and Chris was putting a very good word for me being hired into the Times, and for that I will always be indebted, and that's why I'm here tonight, because I owe him one. So I think I'm just going to sort of talk off the cuff until he tells me to shut up, and I'll be happy to answer any questions you might have, which I suspect, based on my early receptions, there will be many. So it's it's been the last several weeks have been some really sobering news in our business across a whole bunch of spectrums. The New York Times is in the process of laying off 100 people in their newsroom. I think it's the first time they've ever done that. It's about 7.5% of their workforce. They this last week announced the first a loss in the first quarter on what had historically been a very profitable business. And their owner, Arthur Sulzberger, said yesterday that he's going to cut $250 million of costs out of that operation by the end of next year. And as you all know, there's only two costs associated with the newspaper. It's people and paper. So that's going to be pretty dramatic. The Seattle Times is in the process of its first ever newsroom layoffs. That's a union paper. The Chicago Tribune cut 40 people out of its newsroom, which is 6.5% of its workforce. And we just parted company with 42 of our colleagues a couple weeks ago, which was 5% of the workforce in the newsroom. So it's pretty sobering news across the industry. That's the bad news. The good news is that we have more readers today than we've ever had in any time in our history. In addition to the million plus papers we sell on Sunday, and over 800,000 during the week, which has a pass-along rate of about 3 people. So we're reaching 2.4 million people every day with the newspaper, and we're reaching over 14 million people with the website, and that's not just in LA, it's around the world. So the web's allowing us to take our journalism and our story to places that we could never get in the paper before. And as you all are familiar with and know, the trick is to figure out how to make money off the folks who are reading this online and are used to getting everything for free, and to do that in a way that allows us to support the journalism and the big newsroom that we have that delivers the stuff that people want to read. And that makes us different than no one else out there. Everybody's in the same boat, all trying to figure it out, and I'll talk in a little bit about the different ways that we're trying to tackle that, and then how we observe others. So at the Times, we launched our website in 1996, and for the first couple of years it was actually pretty cutting edge. It was one of the best websites, not just in the newspaper industry, but around the country. And then we went through a successive change of both owners and publishers and editors, and the web sort of got put on the back burner at an unfortunately critical time, right when the dot-com boom was mushrooming, and then subsequently when it also imploded. So we got to the dance early, and then stood on immediately moved ourselves to the sidelines for a number of years, and we didn't get back into the game until about a year and a half ago in a serious way. We have the bulk of our news operations at Times Mirror Squares on the 3rd floor. The website for a number of years was a block and a half down the street in the Bradbury building, and we moved it back into the main paper a couple years ago, but it's on a completely different floor. The two sides didn't talk to each other. It was basically flip and paste the paper online and hope somebody notices that it's there for people who can't get the paper elsewhere. And so a year ago, January, I got tapped. I was the business editor at the time, and I got tapped to try to figure out how to marry the two mediums in our own building. And there were a bunch of similar appointments of people in newsrooms around the country. Around that time, and a couple of years preceded, Chris, they've got a terrific guy at USA Today, Kinsey Wilson, who's a managing editor there, who's it was a couple of years ahead of us in their whole process. So that was a new job for us. There's no playbook on how to do this stuff, and so I gravitated towards the folks in the newsroom who were the early adopters, who got the internet, understood it, and wanted to do more. I got immediately, my email basket just went ballistic with people saying, I want, how can I help? What can I do? Here's some ideas. And so over the next 14 months, we greatly expanded our online presence in our news operation. We hired a terrific editor from the International Herald Tribune.com named Meredith Ardley, who arrived last March. She had a ton of experience with internet websites. internet news websites. And we took our web staff upstairs from about 20, the editorial portion, we doubled it in size from about 25 or 30 people to 65. And in the print newsroom, we took any warm-blooded volunteer who raised their hand and said, I want to come join the effort, we basically grabbed. And there were about 40 of those folks, which at the time was about 5% of our newsroom workforce. So that was actually a pretty cool thing to be able to. And with the help from our editor at the time, Jim O'Shea, we converted those people off of the print payroll. We had a sufficient payroll budget for the web operation. And we, on the fly, had to put together a training program that taught these folks how to use the tools to post stories online, how to do photo galleries, shoot video, and those sorts of things. And sort of the momentum started to grow. I can't remember a year ago what our web traffic is, but the last 6 months or so, we're up more than 30% year over year on our web traffic. I don't know how many of you are long time, I would define long time as 5 years or less, users of LAtimes.com.
Press people that microphone.
Sure. But it, hopefully you've noticed the differences in the website over the past year. It has changed dramatically. There is not an hour that goes by that we don't have multiple postings of new news up throughout the day. A year ago, you'd be lucky if you saw anything new before noon. There's video, tons of video. Each of the sections on the site of the various topics go really deep. We are adding new stuff to it every day, and we still sort of feel like we're getting warmed up. So the web is going to be a it's obviously the future of our business. It's also grown. The nice thing that's working in this direction is that as the traffic has grown, the revenue is growing along with it. And I think this year we may actually will be one of the few papers where 10% of our total revenue will come just from the web, and that's a pretty big milestone to have crossed. It was 5% a couple years ago, and 7.5% or 8% last year. So it's growing nicely. In fact, we have an interesting problem on our site from time to time is that we run out of what we call inventory. In some of the sections where there's so much advertising demand for the spots that we don't have enough content to put up a page when someone has an ad. So there's one of the challenges, and it's a nice problem to have in business, travel, the home section, and parts of the sports site where the demand for stories and other video and graphics and photos is really high. So we're having to marshal more resources in that direction. And then about halfway through the year, last year, Jim asked me to then tackle a paper, which, we like to think we're one of a handful of the best newspapers in the country, but our circulation has been declining steadily for years. And we've had various initiatives to try to reverse that. We've tried. One of my favorite lines is I know we have gotten how to cover LA down. We've tried it a number of different ways, and we got it right once. I just don't know which time that was. So we have to double back and look at some of those efforts and figure out how we're going to do that. But in any event, so we put together a team of people, about 30 folks, to sort of study that, and we fanned out across the newsroom and around the country to talk to different folks about how they read the paper and how other news organizations have dealt with this problem, and put together a 40-page report called Reinvent, which made about 50 recommendations for ways to improve the paper. And we weren't, the thing kicked up a lot of dust inside the building because, as you know probably from working with organizations, no matter what size they are, change is always a scary thing, and especially in a really tradition-bound culture like ours, there's a lot of, the fear of the unknown is a sort of a powerful thing. So the report mostly dealt with the readability of the paper, and it addressed things like story length and utility, how we can make our stories more relevant to folks who live in LA, how we can make them less onerous to read, and more user-friendly. And we talked about a number of things, including one of our issues at the building, and we're not alone in this business, is that there's a whole bunch of 40 and 50-year-olds in our building, which skews nicely with our core readership, but as those folks move into older age brackets, they move out of the prime time market of advertisers, and so we've always been a paper that has had a little bit of an older readership because we've been considered somewhat of an affluent and upscale read. But with the immigrant population in Southern California and the I forget what letter we've assigned.